Senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, request that proceedings under the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I was in the cloakroom listening to my colleague from Rhode Island talk about the issue that he is clearly very passionate about relating to our climate, and recognizing that in that space, as we think about energy and our energy needs as a nation, our economic security, our energy security, our national security, how that's all tangled and intertwined. I can't help but think we have colleagues from very different perspectives that have stood on this floor over the course of the past couple weeks. And it seems that one thing that we have really found some level of consensus on is that it's time to update our energy policies. It is time, it's been over 8 years now since we have seen any energy policies that really do anything to move us forward as a nation, that work to help us be more energy efficient, be more energy independent, move towards a cleaner energy future, embrace the technologies that we have available to us. There's a recognition that we need to act together to update our energy policies. And so I want to I've come to the floor this evening to just speak to where we are in this process of successfully moving an energy modernization bill across the floor of the United States Senate. We took this up some 2 weeks ago now, and I wanted to comment on some of the comments that were actually made on the floor this morning. There was a comment that was made that as Republicans we need to get to yes on assistance for Flint. And I have stood on the floor here and have made clear that there's no doubt in my mind that Flint is the site of just a tragedy that should have been, could have been avoided. There's no doubt in my mind but that federal assistance could be provided to help with the city's ongoing crisis. But there's also no doubt in my mind but that this is something where we just need to get to yes on a number to help Flint out. We just need to get to yes. We need to figure out what that right amount is. It sounds easy. It sounds easy. And those of us that, again, are committed to not only addressing the situation, the urgent situation that we see in Flint, but a recognition that there is a broader problem at play here when we think about our nation's infrastructure and our water infrastructures. So I wanted to take just a few minutes this evening to speak to that and kind of where we are in this process and why this getting to yes has perhaps been more problematic than most had hoped. I want to remind my colleagues that what we've been debating here on the floor is an energy bill. It is a bill that was written by myself as the chairman of the Energy Committee, along with Senator Cantwell from Washington as my ranking member. It included the presiding officer as a member of the committee, along with dozens of other members that serve on the Energy Committee. It's been the result of more than a year of regular process, regular order within the committee, where we worked to consider ideas from all over the board. We undertook an effort that some would say you just don't see around here anymore. We started with an agreement between the chairman, myself, and the ranking member, and said, do we want to send a message this year about what we need to do with energy and our energy policies, or do we want to bring about some change? Is it time to update our energy policies after 8 years? And the two of us agreed that we wanted to make that change. And so we recognized that in order to do that, in order to get it through the committee with a good bipartisan vote, in order to get it to the floor, we were going to have to work together. We made that commitment, our staffs made that commitment, and we not only said we were going to do it, we did it. And we started off with a series of oversight hearings that we had here in Washington, D.C. and around the country, bringing people in, soliciting their ideas. After the oversight hearings, we had 6 legislative hearings before the committee, going through a host of different initiatives. There were 114 bills, separate bills, some from members of the committee, some from members who were not serving on the Energy Committee, but who had good ideas. And we reviewed them all, considered them as part of the bill that we were building. And then we had our markup. We went into 3 days of markup before the Energy Committee. We considered over 50 different measures from again, folks within the committee and outside the committee, Republicans and Democrats, urban and rural. In the committee process, it was full on, it was an open exchange, it was any good idea, any amendment that you have. If you think that you've got the votes, let's run it. If you think that you don't and you still want to run it anyway, let's work it. And we worked that committee process. And we considered 59 amendments within the committee. It was a good process. And because it was a good process and it was so inclusive, we got a bill that moved out of the committee 18-4. The 4 dissenting votes was kind of interesting. We had 2 Republicans that dissented and 2 Democrats. Even the opposition was bipartisan. So I say this by laying the groundwork for what we really have built, because I want colleagues to appreciate the substance of the measure that we have before us with the energy policy modernization. So we then come to the floor, the first of the year, the first big bill to come to the floor and take up valuable floor time. And I'm pleased that we were able to come to the floor early. In the time that we've been to the floor, we have dispensed with 38 amendments. 38 amendments. Most of those have gone by voice. Not because it's been kind of a, take this or leave it approach. Voice vote means it comes by unanimous consent. You have to get consent to get these before the body. And so we worked through a host of different issues all over the board, whether it related to advanced nuclear or whether it related to coal research or whether it related to issues as they relate to our public lands. So we have been working this throughout this process. In fact, Mr. President, I think it's important to recognize that even during this time period where it's been kind of quiet on the floor, you haven't heard people talking much about where we are with the energy bill, our staffs on the majority side and the minority side have been working together to clear even more amendments that have that support that we could move by voice. Almost 30 additional amendments on top of what we have already done. So we're not letting the moss collect and gather as we're trying to deal with the situation that has detracted and distracted this energy bill. And that is the nature of the Flint issue. But again, I don't want people to think that the basis of the bill which brought us here, a bill that would modernize our energy policies, a bill that would help America produce more energy, a bill that will help Americans save money, a bill that would help our nation with our national security, our energy security, and our economic security, a bill that would help to cement our status as a global energy superpower. It's important that we remember why we are here. And others are remembering that. When we left the floor on Thursday with an indeterminate path forward into into how we were going to advance the energy bill. Those groups that have been interested in following this debate have come to us with a little bit of concern saying, wait, don't stop that forward movement. The Bipartisan Policy Center has sent out a letter urging us to move forward with this Energy Policy Modernization Act. Clear Path has urged us, please, this is important to us from a clean energy perspective. Bill Gates has put out a letter on his blog post urging us, please don't forget that as we're talking about how to resolve the situation for Flint, Michigan, that we don't forget the importance of the underlying bill that we're debating here, which is the Energy Policy Modernization Act. Now, the progress that we have made, I think, on this bill is critically important. And again, we are working with the ranking member to just keep plugging along on all of those issues that we have outstanding. We believe that we have a path forward for a bipartisan bill, a bill that so many members of this body have come to the floor and said, this is good, this is important, this is something that we need to do. We're not going to forget that. But in the meantime, what we're dealing with is this plea for assistance, federal assistance, by the people of Flint, Michigan. And as I said last week, I don't fault that request. Coming from a state like Alaska, which has considerable needs of its own when it comes to water infrastructure. In far too many of my communities, it's not a situation of aging infrastructure, it's a situation of no infrastructure, no clean water, no safe drinking water. And so I understand, but I'm increasingly frustrated by where we are now and how the decisions that have been made to date are effectively stopping all activity on an energy bill, even as it becomes perhaps increasingly obvious or clear that the issue related to Flint, the urgency of Flint's situation, but the bigger issue that we see looming when it comes to our nation's water infrastructure, that is a problem that demands a level of scrutiny and attention that we as a Congress should give. But is this vehicle, the Energy Policy Modernization Act, is this energy bill the right vehicle for what is being sought right now? What I want to make sure that not only colleagues know, but people who have been following this issue know, we have been working in good faith towards a solution that would help address the situation in Flint. There are many of us, many Republicans working with the senators from Michigan, many working to try to find a good faith solution. And I have been engaged in this from the very get-go. I have been working as well as many Republican members, and we found some programs out there that make sense for providing assistance. The State Revolving Fund is one that we have looked to, and we have, along with our staffs, we have spent considerable hours debating the merits of different approaches, drafting language for them, working to resolve scoring issues, and generally trying to seek a path forward. While many were enjoying the Super Bowl on Sunday, I can tell you we were not. My staffs were not. Actually, the senator from Washington and I happened to be on the same airplane coming back from the West Coast so that we could be here to work on this bill. So we missed the game, but even those who were here on our staffs weren't watching the game. They were going back and forth with CBO to determine if the solutions that we had laid down were going to work. Were they going to meet the scoring issues? Were they going to avoid the blue slip issues? Was it going to be a viable path forward? And we've been doing this since day one. And so I think it's important to outline to people that when it's suggested that somehow or other we just need to get to yes quickly, that there's a range of factors that have complicated our efforts. We are not helped on an energy bill that has drawn widespread acclaim for a very open process by the fact that as we're trying to deal with the situation with Flint, there hasn't been an open process. There hasn't been a process, and I think this is what is complicating so much of what we're doing. This is a bigger issue. The urgency of Flint, maybe that is more specific, but again, this is bigger than Flint. We've heard from colleagues on both sides of the aisle that there are issues around our respective states, around our country that we're going to have to be dealing with. So we've got an amazing, complete process with the energy bill that we have methodically, consistently, almost over the top gone through a process. And now we've got something that's kind of airdropped in, to use an expression around here, that is not as easy as people would suggest. It's not just something where just say, throw some money at it. We're not helped by attempts to federalize the response to the crisis, regardless of the federal government's share of the responsibility in it. And I believe that there is that proportionate share where we've got to be there. We're not helped by the president's decision not to issue a disaster declaration, but instead to grant a much more limited emergency declaration. And then we're not helped necessarily by the president's budget that he laid down today. He didn't request funding for Flint in this massive budget proposal. In fact, the funds that we have been looking at that could help Flint, the state revolving funds, that level is not increased. What we've actually seen has been a decrease in the Clean Water Fund. That's not going to help us because we recognize that we've got to address those issues as well. And also, we're not helped when the ask is for far more federal dollars than the city of Flint may be even capable of spending over the next year. We've been trying to identify, trying to discern what is it that would help. I have had a conversation with the governor of Michigan myself, trying to discern it. I have talked with the senators from Michigan. I have talked with the House members from Michigan. We've got at least 4 Flint-related amendments that are pending to the energy bill from the Michigan delegation alone. But again, in terms of the extent of the repairs that need to be made, is it all of the pipes in Flint? Is it trying to get a corrosion control system in place that is it? Do we have a final estimate for what those repairs will cost? The plan of action that will be required? And I appreciate the senator from Michigan's response when we had a little bit back and forth with the senator from Texas, saying that in her bill there is a requirement that it be detailed how these monies are spent. And so I truly appreciate that part of it. But we're being put into a situation where we're trying to divine the right amount here. And this is important for us to get right. So as important as it is for us to get to yes, to figure out what we can do to help Flint in a way that is fair to Flint, but fair overall, we have to want to get it right as well. And so, again, I was reading the clips last night. New York Times had an article about all around the country. We're seeing other states that are sending up an alarm in terms of situations within their communities, from Pennsylvania to Ohio to California, where there is a need to not only improve the current infrastructure, but there are issues in these communities that have raised a level of concern that we should all be concerned and caring about. So how we approach this, how we make sure that in an effort to kind of rush money out the door to Flint alone, that we don't put ourselves in a place where we commit to a course where the federal government pays for all of the costs for local water systems. We can't legislate crisis by crisis, community by community, or pretend that the federal government is not already $19 trillion in debt. We have to do right by this. We want to address the urgency. I want to address the urgency for the people in Flint, but I want to make sure that we do right. I think most members recognize that our solution is going to have to be national in scope because there are other communities in other states that may also need help. Most members know that our answers must be responsible in light of our already difficult fiscal situation, and most members are at least willing to consider the legislation that provides assistance so long as it doesn't violate our Senate rules, the Constitution, or add to the federal deficit. And again, this is where we're kind of sitting here today, Tuesday evening. There's a couple plans that have been viewed as viable because they meet that criteria. They meet the criteria in terms of not adding to the federal deficit, not violating the rules of the Senate, and not violating our Constitution. So, and it is interesting that both of those measures actually are measures that come from this side of the aisle. I do note that the majority leader is on the floor, and I would defer to him at his convenience. Otherwise, I will keep going with my comments. One, Mr. President, is an offer that I laid down last week. It is an offer that would make $550 million available. $50 million would be made available through state revolving grants. This could help the people of Flint and other communities that have contaminated drinking water. It gives access to $500 million in loans. It is fully paid for. It is one of the few viable offsets that we have found within the jurisdiction of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, where I am the chairman. And I think that's part of the issue that we need to be discussing here. It is so important to make sure that as we look to these pay-fors, that they are pay-fors that we can come to agreement on. And I believe that this one is viable because I do believe that it is one where we can come to agreement on. I asked for unanimous consent last week that we could make this amendment be pending for a vote. That was rejected. The second proposal was one made by Chairman Inhofe, who's the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction. And he also introduced an amendment last week that was fully paid for, but he used funds that are available from an all but dormant loan program at Department of Energy, which is used to subsidize the auto industry. And we can go back and forth about the merits of that fund, but the fact remains that it would have been a viable pay-for this measure that Senator Inhofe had laid down. But it too was rejected, even though it was effectively an offer to prioritize assistance for the families and the children in Flint over some of the major corporations, and we were told no. And that's kind of where we are right now. If you want to know why the negotiations aren't proceeding as quickly and as smoothly as they had hoped, I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we are where we are. The fact is that many of us are willing and are trying valiantly, in many cases desperately, to get to yes. But we can't get to yes just on anything. We can't get to something, we cannot accept something that's not paid for. We can't do something that, quite honestly, would jeopardize, would doom the underlying energy bill. And I think we can't get to yes on something that provides more funding than could reasonably be used in the short term, or ignores the problems that we are facing in other parts of the country. And so we've looked at how you can separate this, how you can work it out on a standalone measure. I think it needs to be a priority. I think it needs to be made a priority. I think Chairman Inhofe on EPW has made it one. But I think that it needs to be separate and apart from what we're doing on this bipartisan energy bill that already includes priorities from over 62 members of the Senate. And I don't think that it's too much to ask that our energy bill be allowed to move forward in the meantime. If we had been able to move forward as we had planned, we would have tucked this thing away last Thursday. We would have had a full week to buckle down and figure out a path forward for Flint and for the nation. But instead, here we are, it's Tuesday, we've got a recess coming up at the end of the week. We haven't had an opportunity to approve almost these 30 amendments that could go by voice. And we're kind of at a stall spot. And I will. I'd be pleased to yield
just
to the majority
for a comment.
leader.
I just want to assure the Chairman of the Energy Committee we're not giving up on this bill. And we're going to stick with it. It's got too much support on a bipartisan basis for us to walk away from it. And I know all of our colleagues on both sides appreciate the ongoing effort you've made to deal with this other issue that's arisen here, regretfully right in the middle of what you were on the verge of achieving here. And we're just going to stick with it. And I wanted you to know I was behind this effort all the way.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and I appreciate the support not only of the majority leader. I had an opportunity to speak with the minority leader on the floor earlier, and he too reiterated the priority of this energy bill. So to my colleagues and to those who have been urging us to carry on, to continue on, know that we are doing exactly that. That I remain committed to not only the Energy Policy Modernization Act, but committed to finding a path forward as we have dealt with this other issue, an important issue relating to Flint and also relating to the rest of the nation when it comes to the security and the safety of our water supplies. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.